I have to say that it's very frightening that a lot of companies still are missing the basics, that foundation, right? A lot of companies think, oh, nothing's happened to us. We haven't been attacked. But of course, a lot of that is, well, you really don't know what's happening in your environment because you're not doing anything. So you have no visibility. I think a lot of companies we've seen conduct layoffs, right? Because they've decided to transform their operations by implementing AI agents and other solutions. But then they're finding out that AI is messing up. It's not performing the way it's supposed to. Now they've had to bring humans back right into the mix to double check the work or redo the work. And so really AI requires human oversight.
In this episode of the AI GovSec discussion series, I'm joined by Harris, a cybersecurity and risk leader with more than 35 years of experience across security programs, threat intelligence, investigations, insider threat, and fractional CISO advisory. Harris has worked with organizations across manufacturing, aerospace, finance, healthcare, retail, and consumer goods. So this conversation brings a very practical view of what AI governance looks like in the real world, especially for the mid-market companies that are still trying to get the security basics right. We talk about why AI governance is not just a technology issue, but a business risk issue. So if you are a CISO, risk leader, internal audit leader, or board member trying to understand what practical AI governance should look like, this is the conversation worth listening to. Thanks a lot, Harris, for joining the AI GovSec discussion series. Really appreciate you taking out time and sharing all the gold knowledge with the community, because you are on the other side of the pond from us. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, of course. And thanks so much, Eddie, for having me here today. Any type of opportunity to talk about cybersecurity and risk is always welcome. So I've been in the industry for, not to date myself, but 35 plus years. I've worn many hats along the way, but a good majority has been in cybersecurity and risk, whether it's building a new security program in an enterprise company or building a practice area in a consulting firm. It's been a very interesting ride. I've seen a lot of things, experienced a lot of things, but it's been great along the way. And for the last 4 years or so, or almost 5 years, I think, I've been offering fractional CISO services to mostly mid-market sized companies in the manufacturing, aerospace, finance, a couple other areas, I think retail and consumer goods as well. Happy to be here.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Harris. And I think you have undersold yourself over there, I would say that, because I think your background and your experience is really solid and gold. Right. So let's jump in that background as a start of the podcast. So, as you said, I know you have spent sort of 30 plus years across the cybersecurity, threat intelligence, investigations, and you have been fractional CISO across multiple industries like manufacturing, aerospace, healthcare, retail. I don't know if anything is left in there. What's the common AI governance thread? Let me phrase it differently. What's the common thread across all of them, which you see more from a security perspective? And then with the new evolving technology as AI, what do you see the existing gap as AI governance?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I have to say that it's very frightening that a lot of companies still are missing the basics, that foundation, right? A lot of companies think, oh, nothing's happened to us. We haven't been attacked. But of course, a lot of that is, well, you really don't know what's happening in your environment because you're not doing anything. So you have no visibility. The other one that I see a lot, especially with the clients that I have in mid-market, is a lot of them are doing business with larger enterprise companies and they require compliance. So they'll require ISO 27001, or even in Europe, a lot of countries will require like TISAX, if you're doing business with automakers. And so a lot of clients will come to me and say, hey, we have these two vendors. Now they're requiring us to have ISO 27001. We don't really have a security department per se. What do we do? And so then it gets into that whole conversation. Well, you need to have an ISMS. Oh, what the hell is an ISMS? And then what does that do? And, et cetera, et cetera. And it kind of goes from there. With AI, I think it's, or even advanced technologies and things, I think it's made things even more difficult and frustrating for people. I think they have business. So I have some examples, but I have some clients where they'll have a business line that'll come to them and say, "Hey, look, we saw this great agentic AI agent that can help us, be more efficient around, supply chain or around warehousing or distribution, and we really want to use it." And then nobody really understands what it does or how to even assess that vendor, right? Because a lot of vendors love to throw out, "Oh, we have a SOC 2, you know, and a SOC 2 is not the, 100% holy grail that, the solution is okay." You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. No, aligned with that. So I think the underlying statement, what we are saying is the client still sort of doesn't understand the risk they're getting into with the AI, and they don't have even the building foundations built up to manage those AI agents, which can do magic for them as they believe.
They're doing some things. A lot of times they stick security in IT, right? There's a lot of companies now that, even startups, I see it all the time, where they're trying to hire a quote unquote CISO, but the CISO reports to the CTO. That's the wrong place to be reporting to. So there's still that sort of misnomer of, where does the CISO belong in the environment or the organization? And then really, what is cybersecurity really about? It's about the business, it's about risk, right? Overall, it's not just IT. And over the last, I don't know, 20 years, it's been constantly, constantly saying this. It's not about IT anymore. It's about the business. And you just have to keep saying it so that people really understand that's the seriousness of the problem.
So moving on, I know in your experience you have built up some executive security advisory practices. I think one at NTT, serving, for example, Fortune 1000 to 1000 companies, and then built up another practice at Aon around the incident response and insider threat. If I ask you how AI has changed those advisory conversations, if you may, you are having with both CISOs or CEOs today versus 3 years ago or 4 years ago, what AI has done in between.
Yeah. So a lot of it, and I do talk a lot about this in some of my posts and things. I talk a lot about AI governance, guardrails, right? Safeguards. There's a lot of people out there talking about that today. Some companies kind of, they understand what that means, but there's probably a good percentage that don't. They sort of think, "Oh, it's just a compliance checkbox again." And it's not really taking serious measures to make sure that the AI is operating in a, what I would say, a trustful way. So it's really been about bubbling up the conversation about trust to the top of the discussion, right? Trust is in everything. You really can't trust anything anymore, and you really have to verify first. And I try to bring that into my conversations, especially when clients are looking at new solutions and they're like, "Oh, hey, this is the best thing because it was created by a bunch of Israelis that came from 8200. Well, that's nice and everything, but we're in the United States. You have to verify first. You have to do an assessment. You have to make sure that they have proper guardrails in place, proper safeguards. It's not going to act in a unbiased way. All these different things that still people just haven't wrapped their arms around. They're just trusting that, oh, hey, the solution must be great.
Understand. And are you also saying, because I know in Europe, as I'm speaking with people, in Europe, I think some of these external service providers, the way they are being asked by these boards, why you were charging me for, let's say, cybersecurity or sort of security operations service X amount. Now AI can do all of that. So I don't need you, and I will just implement an AI on Llama, or I will get a cloud subscription and my team will be magical again. Do you face that when you have those conversations with boards and CISOs and CEOs? And how do you tackle it if you face it?
I would say half and half. I think some of the folks that I've spoken to, they're still on the fence as far as it comes to AI. They've heard from their CEO peers that maybe a peer had enabled Claude to do XYZ, and then they found out that it made errors. Now, I think if you use most AI, like if you're using Gemini, or there's always that disclaimer at the bottom now, right? AI is not perfect. Please check. And it's not perfect. And I think that this keeps bubbling up that it really isn't. I think a lot of companies we've seen conduct layoffs, right? Because they've decided to transform their operations by implementing AI agents and other solutions, but then they're finding out that AI is messing up, it's not performing the way it's supposed to. Now they've had to bring humans back right into the mix to double check the work or redo the work. And so, really, AI requires human oversight. And I always try to be thoughtful with that when I'm having discussions with boards and CEOs and the like, is that you still need to have humans involved at this point. I believe that you're still going to need humans involved.
100% agree. Even if not anything else, because humans bring those diversity, culture, like different things, their own background, and they add more value in the day-to-day work they are doing. Versus it's like just AI agents or like Claude, you've got exactly same copies of each other, people sort of thing. I know you have posted a lot about this AI risk management framework around the map, measure, manage, govern. And obviously, as you are seeing, and I'm also seeing, like most organizations are having these AI projects and AI transformations and a security policy, but probably not like an AI risk management policy or risk management framework. When you see this, what do you think, and what would be your advice to these sort of organizations?
Well, again, it comes down to third party risk, right? All of these providers are essentially they're a third party. Third party risk has been a huge issue in the industry, right? All types of companies, all types of industries. If I want to go backwards to the Target breach in 2012, right? That was the mainstay, the start of the data breaches that were related to third parties. And now you have these AI providers as well. And they're introducing this advanced technology into the mix, into an environment. One of the things, I have a client that they were looking at a particular AI solution. And of course, when I see agentic, that's sort of okay, well, what's this agent going to do? What's it going to have access to? Is the data secure? Is the data held confidential, right? Or is it used to, you know, educate other LLMs or other clients and things like that, especially like if it's an industry solution and things. But again, we still have companies that are not taking third party risk as important as it should be. They're relying again, right? The organization has a SOC 2. All these big companies are clients of theirs, so it must be okay. Or the bigger one is, oh, it uses AWS as an infrastructure. So it really must be okay because they're just the best. And I just have to say that's like farthest from the truth because it comes down to whose responsibility is it, right? That they typically have that shared responsibility model between the cloud provider and the client. And sometimes the client, again, has no clue whose responsibility is to protect data, to have identity, etc. And they just leave it up to the cloud provider. Then there's a breach. And then whose name is in the news? It's the client, not AWS. So again, I think it just comes back to that third party risk again.
If I just try to probe a little bit on the AI risk management framework itself,
Yeah.
you've got these map, measure, manage, and govern. And what I am seeing personally is like even map at the first place, like organizations are struggling, right? You had shadow IT and now you have shadow AI. Can you share your thoughts? Like how realistic do you see, even if an organization think about to adopt it, what are the challenges and how they can map what is being used in the organization?
Yeah. I have to applaud the fact that these frameworks have come out so quickly. the AIRMF, the ISO framework or compliance for AI, which is great. I mean, people were actually listening, and now we've got these frameworks. But again, it goes back to, are people actually going to use the frameworks as a guide, right, to ensure that they're doing the right thing? I will caveat and say that there's a lot of startups. I haven't talked to a lot, but I've talked to a few. And startups generally are, we have to get the product out there as fast as possible. And we're less concerned about security, and we'll get to it later. Obviously, that's the wrong direction or the wrong strategy. Yeah, it's just like shadow IT. It's just like, you know, asset inventory. I mean, I hate to bring up asset inventory again. It comes back to like, what assets do you actually have in place? And a lot of organizations, they don't quite understand that assets also include data. Like, what data do you have in your environment? Where is it located? Even like what kind of data you have?
Mhm.
Yes, you have organizations that, if we look at like shadow IT, right? Somebody wants to use a particular application, IT says no, right? That's not an authorized app or software. But then they go and they just do it anyway. And then it pops up in monitoring somewhere. And then you have to resolve it. A lot of companies, remember when ChatGPT came out at first, and a lot of organizations were blocking ChatGPT from being used within those organizations for a number of reasons, right? You know, data protection, intellectual property theft, you know, whatever it might be, even a lot of educational institutions and things like that. And so we saw a lot of that. But you have to kind of think, well, I mean, there's probably people, you know, they've got a cell phone, right? They've got a mobile device. They can get on the mobile device and use ChatGPT. So how are you going to stop that? I've seen clients that, because they were using security monitoring, were able to detect shadow AI. Someone uses ChatGPT to run code, and then all of a sudden you've got a new application running, and it's like, where did that come from? I think there's going to be obviously a lot more of that. But if an organization is not doing anything like monitoring, or has no visibility in the environment and doesn't know what assets are out there, that could be detrimental.
And I think probably this framework will enable organization to at least start in the right direction and start mapping and start having the best inventory and shadow IT plus the AI tools also in there. So it will start eradicating the shadow IT and shadow AI both probably together. I think you also wrote about like no owner equals to unmanaged risk, or like about ownership is sort of directly related to risk when it comes to AI. And obviously with AI, we have a lot of debate in the security communities about if AI is making a decision, who owns it, and then how does the whole risk lens plays through it. So as a fractional CISO in your engagements, when you are advising clients around it, what's your stance? Like, where do you say it? How do you sort of advise clients, like from an ownership of AI decision making perspective?
Yeah. So in most of my clients, again, there's no formal information security or cybersecurity department per se, right? Because I'm essentially that. They may have engineers and whatnot, but it's all within, encapsulated into IT essentially. And a lot of times it's smaller teams and things. And so the IT organization is typically manned or staffed or managed the right way with typically a network architecture person, someone that's kind of over policy and whatever else. And then you've got a bunch of engineers and things. And it sort of goes back to the same discussions I have with them, especially like around, let's say, ISO 27001, which requires mapping of your risk using a risk register, that type of thing, continuous improvement, et cetera, et cetera. But a key part of that is identifying who owns the risk. And a lot of times that comes down to talking to the CIO, if they have one, or even the C-suite, the CEO, and that type of thing, and understand what their idea of risk is. Most business people have thought about risk, obviously, and they understand risk. But then when it comes to cyber, they like, Oh, really? Is that a risk thing? Yeah, that's really a risk thing. And I just have the conversation and say, look, we need to identify people that are going to own it. That might be your like your network architecture people, right? Because they are implementing it within the organization. It might even be the business line leader that wants to use it. So like maybe a supply chain person. So again, it comes down to the organization, the specific organization, how they want to identify who owns the risk, right? Because I've seen some organizations where I mean they'll go down many layers of people, which if that's the way they want to do it, that's fine. I typically will suggest at the leadership level or the manager level or whatever, the person that owns network architecture, that person owns the risk, right? Because they manage the people under them, et cetera.
And you work for clients where you are the actual security department end to end, right? How do you manage those situations where, for example, where the business wants to move faster, a little bit more faster, and they want to do like some automation, some tooling to enable more clients or enable sort of help their clients? And you are like the person saying, what about governance? What about risk? What about ownership here? What would be your advice?
I mean, I actually have to say that with the clients that I have currently and this and in this particular situation, it's been very positive, let's just say. We're moving at the same speed, the same direction. I typically educate as much as I can and make sure that the organization is implementing the proper controls, which makes it a lot easier when if you come down to like, oh, hey, now we have ISO 27001. Now you have to maintain your controls. It's not like, hey, you got the certification and you can just back off of it and go do the same thing, right? You can't do that anymore. Luckily, I would say for that, clients are definitely more in line and more of a partnering mode to make sure that I'm buying off or approving the direction that they're going so that they are managing cyber risk properly.
So just from the back of it, and I know maybe one more question for Shadow AI, and then I will leave you without it, right? When you start on these clients or when you enter into these sort of organizations, how do you start discovering, mapping that framework?
Yeah, so it's similar to, well, starting somewhere as the CISO, right? You have to get sort of the lay of the land. A lot of it came down to meeting the various stakeholders, just like you would anyway, but to understand what tools they use or what tools they're dependent upon, right? And
Mhm.
what's critical to the business, right? Because that's important for ISO 27001 or whatever it might be, right? Yeah, I have to sort of list out your dependencies on third parties and things like that. And the best way to understand that is to talk to the stakeholders and the business line leaders and understand what they are using. And in some of those cases, you find out, oh, hey, it would be really nice if we had this. And it's like, well, are you using something like that now? Well, no, we're not doing that right now because it's against policy. And it's like, okay, let me take note of that one. And then there's so much you can do with whatever tooling you have in place, right? You could run reports and audits to understand what type of applications and stuff are out there. You know, you could do that through your firewall report, or if you've got CASB, you could look at all your third-party SaaS providers, things like that. I mean, there's a lot of ways you can run reports and understand when people think that there's probably a lot of applications in use and probably a lot of them are against policy, right? You sort of have to rein that in. And obviously, if they've got monitoring in place, that's another great way to sort of understand what's there. Some of my clients, they actually have implemented a commercial version of ChatGPT, mainly for executives and for managers and key personnel. And they use it, they use it for business purposes technically only, but it's all contained. It's not educating other LLMs and things like that. Like everything is supposedly staying
Mhm.
private. Yeah.
Got
So,
it.
yeah.
It's a really difficult and interesting start, I would say.
I mean, it's like anything, it's like any technology that's introduced to organizations, right? It's just going to get worse in a way because there's just so many options out there, and people will find a way. If they have to circumvent policy or circumvent controls, they will try and find a way. You kind of have to keep it in the back of your mind that there will be people like that will do that. And when you do come across it, you have to take proper action. If you have strong policies and things like that, strong employee handbook, acceptable use policy that employees have to sign every year, right? At least you have some teeth in it, right? And say, look, if you violate it to a certain degree, you could be terminated. So I would think that most people today would not want to be terminated, especially given everything else that's going on.
I think you've spent over a decade as a licensed investigator and have done sort of designed dozens of insider threat programs. So if you can give an overview of what you did there. And then the second question on the back of it is, how does the whole AI change the whole insider threat landscape, both as a vector, but more as a detection tool as well?
Sure. So that's an interesting conversation that could take hours to talk about, but I'll try and keep that to a short minimum. So one, I mean, for insider threat and a lot of companies that I worked at, I had some responsibility either building that program out and or investigating those cases. As we know, right, from industry reports and things like that, human risk is a huge part of insider threat, makes up the majority of it, right? But the engaging stuff is, of course, the malicious stuff, the criminal stuff, the nation state stuff that I did work a lot of. So as a private investigator, most of the work that I did was working for companies or working for governments, working in the realm of domestic terrorism and a lot of insider threat type stuff, mostly nation state. So I'd be hired by clients to investigate with embedded people and things of that nature, which only highlighted that their internal processes or internal hiring practices were flawed. Certain countries don't have the same background ability as the United States does, right? Like if you take Mexico as an example, it's very difficult to do a background check on an employee. You have to contact their local police department and their local, wherever they're located, and then trying to get information that way. It's not as pulled together, right, that we have here in the United States. And so, yeah, so that was a lot of the work that I did there. For companies, sure, you have employees that have decided that they want to steal data and go to a competitor, that sort of thing. And a lot of companies take that seriously because they're stealing customer data or trade secrets or whatever it might be. I would say like in those earlier cases and things and examples, obviously we didn't have AI and most of it was just old school techniques and tactics and things of that nature. I think, has certainly, right, there's good and bad of AI, right? There's the good, it can help detect things faster, it can help identify vulnerabilities faster, right? And remediation and that type of thing, right? But then on the bad side, AI is powering attacks and deceptions and fake profiles and whatever it might be. And so it's it's requiring that detection has to be just as fast or faster than the way AI is acting. And I have talked a lot about this too, that a lot of attacks now, right, they're happening in milliseconds, not minutes anymore. So people would talk about the mean time to detect and the mean time to resolve and, oh, hey, we can do that in 6 minutes. Well, by 6 minutes, you're breached. And so that's why you're finding, right, a lot of the endpoint detection, the response companies or the EDRs, the MDRs, the XDRs, right? They're using some level of AI, an AI agent that's helping at the triage or the detection, the triage piece of it, and then helping and automating other things as well. Because again, the attacks are in milliseconds, so you have to be able to respond or you have to be able to detect in a very quick manner. Problem with that, false positives. You're going to have false positives because it's moving so quickly and you're still going to have false positives. And so you still need to have human oversight, still need to have a human. And I've come across that with some third parties that clients are using where let's say they're doing security monitoring. Let's say a suppression rule was put in place or certain rule detection was supposed to happen a certain way, but the AI agent doesn't know, you know? And so the AI agent does what it's trained to do and is alerting on something that's really a false positive. And then it becomes frustrating to the client because the client's asked for it to be suppressed, but then they're getting alerts on it. So again, it needs human oversight.
I think it gives out what is going on from an insider threat perspective. And have you got any examples after the whole ChatGPT came in 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and since then? Any examples of like interesting insider threats where it has gotten worse, where people have tried to utilize it in different ways?
I think one of the things that I've read about, I haven't technically experienced it or had to look into it, but there's all the talk about how AI is being used to poison LLMs from a standpoint of misinformation. And so I think there's been situations where it's a trend. People are using ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever it might be, as a search engine rather than using a search engine for its purpose. And they're kind of using ChatGPT in the wrong way. And so if you have an attacker that has poisoned the LLM because maybe they're targeting that particular organization, right? It could be competitive intelligence. It could be whatever. It could be insider threat. And the people that are using it are gaining misinformation, and then they're using that, right, in let's say business or in their decision making and things of that nature, and then the information's wrong. I mean, I would say that that's kind of an important trend, is that people using ChatGPT as a web browser.
One of our guests who was in the podcast few weeks ago, I think one of the incident he was talking about there, which was really interesting, is there's this startup which got like Series A or Series B funding, and then their CIO was traveling abroad and the CFO was in the US. So he got in the night a call from the CIO, and it was like a video call on WhatsApp. He picked up and he said, "Can you transfer me $10 million for ABC?" And the CFO authorized it and he transferred the money. And later we found out, like later I think it was investigated, that it was like a very junior IT employee who was trying to use impersonation. And that was really interesting, like innovative attack, I would say.
Well, and that's definitely, I've seen that bubble up in clients as well. Maybe they get a report from Gartner or wherever, and they're talking about deep fakes and impersonation, AI impersonation and things. And there's been certainly plenty of stories, news articles and things like that. Mostly, I mean, I haven't really seen anything in the US. It's mostly been in Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, a couple other places where you'll have that type of scenario where they receive their training, right? Don't trust things, verify. But then when they try and use a method for verification that could be impersonated, that's sort of the breakdown there. And so I had a client that actually brought the subject up, and they said, what is the recommendation for verifying a request and things? And it's, you need to use trusted sources for verification. So if you have a phone number, even if it's, let's say, in a company, right, and somebody's asking for HR records or they're asking for finance records, right, you make it so they have to come see you in person. You have to use trusted, even out of band communications from a business continuity perspective, right? There's an outage. How do we get in touch with employees, that type of thing? And so they use like an out of band third-party communication solution, that type of thing. That way it's not the company infrastructure can't think of the word, but anyway. Yeah, but the whole AI impersonation deep fake thing, that's huge. I think even just with the amount of AI that's on LinkedIn today, on all social media, it's just kind of ridiculous, actually.
I've seen 3-4 LinkedIn accounts even of the same person as well. Very well out there.
And it's easy, and it's very easy to create this stuff as well. There's various solutions out there. I've tested it myself. You can create an audio of a person in like a matter of seconds. All you need is like, hey, this podcast, right? You could take my voice off of the podcast and you could create something in a matter of seconds and it'll sound like me.
And as we are talking about the identity and impersonation, I think one of your article is you wrote about attackers don't break in anymore, they just log in.
Yeah.
And when AI can start acting with their own sort of credentials, which is very well right now happening, accessing data, making decisions on behalf of users and autonomously as well. How does the change around the whole, how does this whole thing changes the identity security conversations or the access security conversation?
I don't know if it's a change. Least privilege has always been sort of a standard, right? Again, it comes back to that you can't trust anybody. You have to verify. So then that's kind of where zero trust has become very popular. And a lot of people think it's new, but zero trust has been around for a very long time. But now a lot of people are moving towards something that's more zero trust because those agents are developed or designed to learn the environment and then go off and do their own thing. Yeah, I mean, there are companies that are deploying them in the environment, but I think people are being careful as far as what they're actually giving it access to up front and maybe testing one area, maybe it's an application or maybe it's whatever it might be or might have access to see how that works and how it operates and making sure that there is again human oversight over that because the last thing you want is some agentic AI agent that's running amok in the background. And because it's getting smarter and thinks, oh, hey, I can do it this way. I don't
Mm.
need to ask anybody. So I'm just going to go off and do it. And then it's running amok in in your environment. So it almost comes back to role-based access security
Mm.
and ensuring that based upon what role the person has in the company, they have they only have access to what they need to have access to. And nobody's got access to sort of everything, right? You're going to have administrators and things like that, but they still will have, it's based upon their role, right? Nobody's going to have access to like everything. If an agent were to get a hold of credentials and things like that, even an insider, right? Or an attacker that has breached your perimeter and is now inside your organization and that type of thing. So cleaning up your identity, right? Active Directory. We hear about Active Directory attacks all the time.
I know you have written exclusively about UEBA as well, user and entities behavioral analytics. I think one of the things when I was sort of going through it, I was wondering whether this concept can detect when an AI tool or agent is behaving incorrectly, how it is supposed to do, or maybe are we not there yet?
UEBA is really designed to understand your users and their behaviors, right? So it typically will set a base sort of standard of activity or behavior of a user, give it a risk score, where they're typically logging in from, those types of things. And then when it acts outside of that, then there's the alerting and other detections and things of that nature that can occur. You see a lot of UEBA now that's partnered with data governance, data movement, DLP. In some cases, people think DLP is the same thing as UEBA, but it's not. There are some companies that are doing, oh, what are they calling it? I think I wrote about it too, predictive perimeter. So predicting, it's more of a predictive behavior of what's happening sort of at the perimeter and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about whether or not it could detect AI or not. I think UEBA is definitely great at identifying lateral movement within the network. I mean, I've certainly used it for that because insiders will typically they'll move east west, right? Sort of in the shadows where your typical telemetry is not picking up on. And so it's easy to find normal jobs that are happening, like cron jobs and things like that are happening in the middle of the night. And then it's a great way to identify like what those are. And Is that legit? Is it not legit? Right. Okay, we can mark that off, that type of thing. So it might be possible to be able to, to detect an AI agent. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't seen much of that. And I'm actually looking at UABA for a particular client, and that topic hasn't really come up. So that might be a good question to bring up.
Yeah, it could be helpful. Maybe we do round two of this where you can bring the insights uh, from that conversation. Super. I know you have posted about 7 CISO mistakes that quietly damage the credibility, selling sort of tools and not outcomes. I think specifically regarding the whole AI risks, because I know a lot of boards are becoming active and having specific sections on AI risk to be reported along with the cyber risk. What are you seeing as one of the biggest credibility mistakes CISOs are making in this space right now? What they should be doing to inform the board on this?
Yeah, so that is actually a great topic because I've had people reach out to me even after that post and, hey, how do you translate risk to the board and how do you get away from KPIs and things like that? It's like the board doesn't want to know about your KPIs. They don't want to know about what tools you deployed into the environment this week. And they just want to know about risk, right?
Mm.
How's that affect the business? Are we prepared? Are we resilient? Right? We don't want to have to shut down. We don't want anything to affect the shareholder, et cetera. If they're a public company, they're even more concerned about risk. And so it's really having those thoughtful, I like to use the word thoughtful, but it's about having thoughtful conversations with the board or with the executives or the audit committee or whoever it might be, but making it a risk discussion over everything else, right? Because cyber is supposed to be a bridge between the business and risk and sort of where you are from a risk perspective, what's your, risk level, et cetera, and how are you treating that risk, right? Or how are you remediating or mitigating that risk? Because a lot of board members, they do talk to other board members and other companies. So a lot of times they're quite aware, quite educated on certain issues, and you'll find that they will sort of like, hey, what have you heard about this? Now, I won't say every board is, because
Mm.
I've had discussions with boards that were really sort of enamored in the whole cyber, like, ooh, wow, that sounds pretty cool and stuff, because they weren't really focused on it, right? But I think a lot of boards today are definitely more focused on cyber risk, especially with advanced tech, especially with AI, even going back to deep fakes and AI impersonations and stuff like that. They're definitely concerned, but it's about just having the right discussions with them, not a technical discussion because they don't understand that.
And I know you have also in the same space. I think you've also sort of said about that CISOs doesn't need to sort of sell to the board another security tool, but they need, I think, more as a decision maker who can guide them, which I think you are reflecting upon. So specifically, when let's say the board asks a security executive that how do we manage or how are we managing AI risks? What does the mature answer looks like, rather than telling them that we are preventing prompt injections and we are preventing hallucinations? How does a mature piece of conversation should answer this at the board level?
I think it just comes down to these are the controls that we have in place. We are using, right? We're using this particular framework as sort of our guidance. We're educating business line leaders, especially the ones that are implementing AI and that type of thing, to make sure that people are making the right decisions. We've assessed the third party properly. We've asked the right questions of them. We're satisfied that it should be successful. And I think you have to bring that governance, right? The governance, the guardrails, the safeguards. We've thought about that. We're using guidance on it, right? We're doing all the right things that we're supposed to do.
Because we are having a very good conversation. I don't want to break the thread here, right?
Yes, it's kind of gone off the rails here.
So that's completely perfect. I wanted to go off the rails because that's what gives the real insights.
No, of course.
Really perfect. So I know you have written about sort of difference between a real disaster management manual versus a manual sitting in the SharePoint as a policy document. So, and if I take that thought and translate as of today, if an AI system creates infection, a chatbot hallucinates, or an AI agent does take unauthorized action, how does the current sort of organization's incident management playbook should look like?
Yeah, the first part of that is it still comes back to basics, right? A lot of organizations still don't have an incident response plan. They don't know how to respond. They don't know how to like corral the groups together to have the discussion, triage the event. How are we going to investigate it? How are we going to tackle it? Who do we have to contact? All of those things. And so again, it's important that, that there be an incident response plan in place, right? That's sort of your what I would call your overall governance of an incident response process. Have done in the past is you have playbooks for how you deal with particular incidents. And the playbooks are more, could be more technical in nature, right? These are the technical measures that we would take to resolve or to investigate a particular issue. So whether that's adding a playbook for AI or advanced tech or agentic agents or whatever it might be, that's probably a good process to have in place. And then sort of that normal review, just like your IR plan, right? Because you certainly learn a lot of things during an incident. We always try to do sort of that root cause analysis at the end or a lessons learned. And then that's a great chance or a great opportunity to update your IR plan and your playbooks and things of that nature. It also comes down to, and I see this a lot in organizations, they have no idea who to contact. So, like application owners, that's probably a big one. But whatever application was affected during the incident. And then you ask that question as the incident commander, well, who would you contact? This came up actually a couple of times in tabletop exercises, and it's who do you contact for that application? Well, I don't know. I don't have a relationship with them. Why don't you have a relationship with them? Well, I don't know. Because is that our job? Well, yeah, actually it is your job. And so having all of those important contact details of who you should be contacting. And again, it goes back to building those relationships in the company and that type of thing, and knowing who the owners are of certain things, right? Just like if a company had deployed an AI solution, right? If the company had a third-party risk management process, right? Obviously, you would know who was owning that from a business perspective. And so if that broke down or if there were issues there, then you would know who to contact. But again, a lot of companies or a lot of organizations, they are missing out on third-party risks. So they have no clue, right? Because you've got, yeah, especially in large enterprises where you might have 6, 7, 8 different business units that are sort of operating within themselves, right? They may be out deploying some new tool and corporate has no clue, right?
Mm,
And then there's an incident and it's like, I don't know, right?
yeah, I'm not surprised by this. I'm seeing this day in, day out as well. So 100% aligned. Right. I think with this, we get into the last section of the podcast where now I'm going to ask you a question which is left by the previous guest. And I think you know the previous guest, which is Cynthia. So don't blame me for the question. The question is raised by Cynthia.
Okay.
Perfect. So the question for you was, how are you modeling the skills and the tools that teams will need, security teams will need in the next 5 years to get the most out of it?
I mean, I have this conversation, well, I talk about this a bunch. And, I mentor early professionals that are trying to get into cybersecurity. They either work in a different industry or they want to really work in cyber. They want to break in, but they don't know what they need to have or the type of experience and stuff. And I think a lot of people are, like a lot of people say, oh, I just want to get into like governance, risk, and compliance. But the thing is that you really actually have to have a basic understanding of networks and how they work, the OSI model, TCP/IP, et cetera, right? I mean, that's for any job in cyber, you have to have those basics, right? I mean, AI is just another technology. I think you still need to, again, you still need to know about networks and things of that nature. Certainly cloud for sure, because most of them are built around an AWS or a Google cloud or others.
Now it's your turn to give me a question for the next guest.
Oh, a question for the next guest.
Yeah.
I'll leave the same question for him.
Okay. This brings us to the end of the podcast. Thanks a lot, Harris. Really appreciate the time. Really appreciate the insights. It has been real gold. So thank you for taking out the time.
You're welcome. It was great to be here, and I appreciate you asking.
Thank you, Harris. Cheers. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.